This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
This is Global Business coming to you live from Nairobi, where it's 9 p.m. I am Peninah Karibe. Wherever you're joining us from, welcome to the show. Let's begin with a look at the markets. The JSE erased earlier gains to record its third consecutive day of losses today. Dutch-based technology group Process led stocks lower. It dropped 3.36%, its biggest fall in nearly 3 months, after Naspers, which is the majority shareholder in the Dutch-based technology group, said it sold around $1.7 billion worth of shares in order to buy back its own stock. Coming up on the show tonight. Uproar in Angola after the hyped Luanda leaks detailing Isabel dos Santos' rise to riches. Leading tech firms call for artificial intelligence regulation to curb misuse. And 473 cases of coronavirus are confirmed in China. Authorities in Angola say they will use all possible means to bring back Isabel dos Santos. The move follows thousands of leaked documents that reveal how the former Angolan president's daughter made her $2.2 billion fortune. With the details, here's CGTN's Mohamed Abubakar.
It all started when the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists published a new investigation this week. This time, the key focus was on how 2 decades of unscrupulous deals made Isabel dos Santos Africa's wealthiest woman. Dubbed as the Luanda leaks, the secret documents detail how dos Santos made her fortune thanks to the influence of her father's 38-year rule of Angola. But the question here is, what does this so-called Luanda leaks say about Angola's rich and powerful?
This is not a new situation. It has been going on for a long time. Naturally, we intervened within civil society to oppose the position taken by the former president and to demonstrate that this theft and looting was indeed a well-organized and well-orchestrated affair, obviously for the benefit of these people.
Based on more than 715,000 documents and hundreds of interviews, the leaked data highlights the role played by firms like PricewaterhouseCoopers in managing dos Santos' assets. They also suggest that while Western banks were often unwilling to support businesses in which she and her husband had invested, the state of Angola and her own banks were there to advance the cash. Much of the couple's money appears to have been reinvested in their businesses. However, the latest leaked expose gives an insight into a rather luxurious spending that has angered many in Angola.
Isabel dos Santos is among those who have the most funds. She is considered the richest woman in Africa. But this fortune does not belong to her. It belongs to the Angolan people and the Angolan state.
Last month, Angola's prosecutors froze bank accounts and assets owned by dos Santos and her Congolese husband Sindika Dokolo. They have now vowed to bring dos Santos back to the country by all means.
Although the investigation is still underway, there is already sufficient data for the public prosecutor of the Republic of Angola to use as material evidence and conduct the necessary investigations so that Isabel dos Santos and others involved can be brought before the court.
Often described as Angola's princess, Isabel dos Santos is currently worth $2.2 billion. She left Luanda after her father's successor came into power in 2017. Dos Santos now operates mostly between Lisbon and London. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
In Sudan, the Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok says his country does not have foreign currency to protect the value of the pound. On Monday, the dollar was selling for 100 Sudanese pounds in cash transactions compared with 88 pounds a week ago. This comes as the official dollar rate continues to widen. Last December, Khartoum passed its post-revolution budget with a $1.62 billion deficit. Former President Omar al-Bashir's administration ran the economy with subsidies on gas, fuel, essential medicine and wheat. But Prime Minister Hamdok's government faces a test on whether to continue with the same, amend the subsidies or abolish them altogether. Let's Let's shift focus now to South African Airways. The national carrier has cancelled several domestic and international flights over the coming week. SAA is currently running short of cash. This comes after the government failed to provide a $137 million emergency fund it promised when the airline entered a form of bankruptcy protection last year. CGTN's Angelo Coppola has more.
The airline has already used $140 million of funding and is waiting for an injection of a similar amount from the government, which is several weeks late.
Our members are feeling very worried, they're very anxious, and I think they have good reason to feel that way. It does seem very clear to us that this business rescue process is in jeopardy. In fact, as NUMSA and SACA, we've gone as far as saying that it's been sabotaged by both Treasury and the Ministry of Public Enterprises.
The Solidarity Union was responsible for preempting the decision by government to put SAA in voluntary liquidation. They aren't excited about the progress made thus far or the government's apparent lack of interest in raising the money needed.
And now we have Minister Zimbabwean still saying they don't know if they can find the funds. So why go through the routes? Why, if you don't have the money, why go through business rescue? So we're happy with the sort of signs that we see that finally we're in a radical restructuring process, but we're quite unhappy with the amount of influence that we think government is still exercising.
While the airline's future hangs in the balance, passengers are putting on a brave face.
Yes, it's quite a little bit of discomfort because I don't know whether when I get back I'll be able to get back home safely and in time. But hopefully, crossing fingers that when we get back then we'll be able to fly back to South Africa. I'm hopeful that all these things they should be sorted out and SAA will be back on its feet.
The airline has seen its fair share of turnaround plans over the years, none of which have led to any substantial improvement in profitability or operating efficiency.
But we've never actually had the patient in surgery. We've always been giving Peninahs and Disprins for somebody who needs open heart surgery. Now we've got them on the slab. Now it's just to start cutting away the right pieces and making sure that the radical restructuring that is necessary actually takes place.
The unions say they're committed to the business rescue process and the plan that will emerge shortly because they don't have a choice.
Because if business rescue fails, it means that 10,000 workers and their families face job losses. And that is not something that as unions we can just simply accept. So we are putting all the pressure to bear on all of those who are responsible for the mess that they've created to force them to act in the interests of all of us.
The situation at SAA has become dire based on the fact that so many of those flights have been cancelled for the next 4 days, which leaves the crew on the ground and basically unemployed. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN at OR Tambo International Airport in South Africa.
Nigeria says it's working with all relevant stakeholders to address the country's growing power crisis. Last year alone, Nigeria's national grid experienced roughly 11 system collapses. Nearly half of Africa's most populous nation, mostly in rural areas, also remain completely in the dark. With more on this, here's CGTN's Kelechi Emekala.
It's the 11th edition of this International Electricity Conference. Hundreds of stakeholders, investors and experts converge from around the world to discuss new ways of tackling the prevailing challenges in the sector. As the largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria's persisting electricity crisis has hampered its economic growth, as the country still suffers a massive infrastructural deficit.
The government is aware of the need to enhance the infrastructure along the electricity value chain. Therefore, it is our focus to deflect the delta between the available capacity and what ends up being distributed by the distribution companies. Our drive is to particularly facilitate the implementation of the Presidential Power Initiative.
Despite a potential to generate over 12,000 megawatts of electricity, the country's generation capacity still hovers around an average 4,000 megawatts, grossly inadequate for its 200 million population, and clearly the national grid is no longer sustainable.
We're looking for more microgrid system that can touch all lives, whether in the rural area or in the urban area. Hence, we also thought the grid of the future must be the grid that has the ability to think. The ability to think, ability to react, ability to self-clear the faults, ability to reconfigure itself.
In 2019 alone, the national grid experienced 11 system collapses and one this year. Over 80 million Nigerians, mostly in rural areas, still do not have access to electricity. So issues of availability, affordability and infrastructural deficit dominate discussions here. And ultimately, the country is talking diversification of energy sources.
We want a power that is flexible. We don't want to depend on only one source of power. We need power that comes from the wind. We need power that comes from cold. We need power that comes from solar. We need power that comes from water. So that at the end of the day, the hybridization of this power allows us to make a choice.
Authorities say the alternative mini-grid system has become imperative. It would be a public-private partnership endeavor. It aims to not only light up the country, but to also drive economic growth and development. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Zimbabwe's junior doctors have agreed to return to work thanks to the intervention of a mobile telecoms mogul. Strive Masiyiwa will pay each doctor a subsistence allowance of about $300 through his Higher Life Foundation. The Econet founder will also provide the doctors with transport to work. The move brings to an end one of Zimbabwe's longest strikes. Last September, doctors in the Southern African economy embarked on a 4-month walkout. This brought services in the country's major hospital to a standstill. The government doctors were pressing for wages to be pegged to the US dollar as a cushion against rising inflation in the worst economic crisis in a decade. Coming up next, a look at your corporate headlines. South African retailer Shoprite has recorded a growth of 7% in its half-year sales. In the 6-month period ending December 2019, the group's total sales increased to roughly $5.62 billion. This was driven by growth in its South African supermarkets. Shoprite stores outside of South Africa, however, have reported a 3.1% decline. The retailer has attributed the drop to currency devaluations and volatility in the market. Elsewhere, Kenya has received bids for a $3.5 billion roads bond. The funds will help finance the building of new roads and maintenance of existing networks. However, it faces possible backlash as the East African economy lobbies lawmakers to pass a legal framework enabling the floating of such debt instruments. And staying in Kenya, Nokia phone maker HMD Global is eyeing the larger East African market with the country as its base. The HMD Global management team has been on a tour in Kenya, meeting regulators and government officials. This comes as the company seeks to grow its current local market share to 10%. That's despite heavy competition in the mobile devices market by Asian manufacturers. Finally, UN investigators are set to release a statement about the alleged hacking of Amazon founder Jeff Bezos' phone. The report will detail a forensic investigation into the long-standing allegations by Bezos that the Saudi kingdom launched a cyber attack on him. Bezos' cell phone was hacked in 2018 after he got a WhatsApp message that came from an account reportedly belonging to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Saudi Arabia has repeatedly denied being involved in the hack. And that's a look at some of your corporate headlines. You're watching Global Business. Still ahead. Leading tech firms call for artificial intelligence regulation to curb misuse. And we explore the business of on-demand phone applications in Africa.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business. Alphabet Chief Executive has warned regulators of a need to manage artificial intelligence and facial recognition to curb potential misuse. Speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Sundar Pichai discussed the potential negative consequences and benefits to artificial intelligence. With the increase in use of the technology, regulators are grappling with ways of governance. The European Commission has resorted to taking a tougher stance on AI in a bid to strengthen existing regulations on privacy and data rights. Part of the measures include prohibition of up to 5 years on using facial recognition technology in public areas. This grants the EU time to work out solutions on how to prevent abuses.
You know, I've said this before, AI is one of the most profound things we are working on as humanity. It's more profound than fire or electricity or any of the other bigger things we have worked on. It has tremendous positive sides to it. But, you know, it has real negative consequences. You know, when you think about technologies like facial recognition, it can be used to benefit. It can be used to find missing people, but it can be used for mass surveillance. And as democratic countries with a shared set of values, we need to, you know, build on those values and make sure when we approach AI, we are doing it in a way that serves society. And that means making sure AI doesn't have bias, that we build and test it for safety. We make sure that there is human agency, that it's ultimately accountable to people.
Here in Africa, developers at Shule Direct in Tanzania have created a virtual teacher using artificial intelligence. Nicknamed Teacher Kidevu, the virtual teacher is transforming the education of hundreds of thousands of pupils in the country and beyond. The innovation comes as a solution to the country's shortage of teachers. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more on that story.
Meet Teacher Kidevu, an AI teacher that's not restricted to one classroom or even one school. The AI system has been teaching hundreds of thousands of students, not only in Tanzania, but the whole of Africa. Created by pioneers of digital education space Shule Direct, the AI system was put in place to address Tanzania's severe shortage of teachers. According to Eric Kondela, one of its creators, rural Tanzania has 3 in 10 of the teachers it needs. But with Teacher Kidevu in action, these children can keep learning.
So Teacher Kidevu basically is an AI chatbot that provides answers to instant questions that are both subject matter and life skills related.
Shule Direct has been creating digital learning resources for learners across Tanzania and Africa for 5 years. Teacher Kidevu is one of its most popular solutions. The Shule Direct team says in the 2 years since it launched Teacher Kidevu, it has already served 1.7 million students across Africa. This is just one example of what AI can do in education. Tech experts believe Tanzania now has to find a way to incorporate artificial intelligence into other key sectors. In the past few years, firms developing AI have sprung up in several different sectors in Tanzania. Tanzania AI Lab is one such initiative that educates citizens on what AI is and its potential for growth for themselves and the nation.
Basically focuses on creating opportunity for locals to harness the power of artificial intelligence and start to use it to solve our local challenges.
AI startups and projects in Tanzania are trying to catch up with the rest of the world, but the cost of investing in AI are still high. Issa Mohamed Ali believes that with time, the cost of using AI in the economy will go down.
And once we show the usefulness of the tool is when it makes sense to get people to swallow that large cost that may be involved.
AI holds the potential to change the way Tanzania and Africa is developing. Experts in the field say it could introduce brand new industries in the process, but they warn it could be a threat to privacy and data protection. As the use of AI grows, education about those risks will need to keep pace with its development. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
South Africa has sent a high-level delegation to the annual World Economic Forum in Davos. The group of government ministers and business leaders has a Herculean task ahead. CGTN's Angelo Coppola has more.
While there are some detractors about the value of attending the WEF meetings in Davos, not everyone agrees.
So there cannot be a better place, basically, as a platform to pitch your own country and to also create the necessary networks and connections that you need to drive the agenda that you have for development in South Africa. So that's critical.
What's also critical is that everyone in the South African delegation sings from the same hymn sheet.
We will continue believing in our story, and we should, I think, as Team South Africa, believe that we want to position ourselves to attract investment. We should position ourselves to actually change the lives of the poor and the marginalized. That we must not forget. And that we've got the NDP, unfortunately, is there. There's a 2030 vision that we have, and we must continue believing in that vision.
On a fundamental level, business leaders at Davos want to see consistency and a decent return on their investments. Otherwise, they will look elsewhere.
If the foreign business contingent says, hey, we believe it's going to be a reliable investment destination, we believe we will get our capital back in due course, we believe we will get a decent return on our funding, and the risks are manageable. Under those circumstances, we need to be there so we can participate.
The World Economic Forum is in full swing, and the Finance Minister of South Africa is there and understands exactly what's needed and what isn't needed to get the country's economy growing again. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
20 years ago, the international community came together to set itself a series of targets. These included sustainable development goals to improve the lives of millions of people around the world. The #1 target was to cut absolute poverty to 3% of the world's population by 2030. Millions of people around the world have been raised out of poverty in the past few decades, but it's not yet clear whether the 2030 target will be met. CGTN's Catherine Drew reports.
Almost 50 years ago, this man founded the World Economic Forum in Davos to improve the state of the world. Today, he is still talking about the need to create wealth.
The best way to foster a more cohesive and inclusive society is to provide everybody with a decent job and income.
Since the first World Economic Forum in 1971, the world's poor, classed as those living on less than $1.90 a day, has fallen from around 2 billion to under 600 million.
Over the last 50 years, the world has experienced an unprecedented moment of collective growth. What we've seen in Asia has been a sustained period of considerable reforms by the two largest countries, not only in the region but in the world, China and India, each pursuing its own package of reforms, but ultimately leading to the same very impressive success rates.
Chris Hamill is part of the World Poverty Clock project. It tracks real-time data to calculate exactly how many of the world's population are in poverty right now and at what rate that number is going down.
This project started 4 years ago, and you can see in 2016, 668 million people were living in extreme poverty. If you scroll forward just 4 years, that number changes to 591 million people.
Large parts of South America are on track to meet the Sustainable Development Goal on poverty, seen here in green, as are many countries in Asia. Africa is making progress, but conflicts, fast-growing populations, weaker economic growth and less robust governments have all hindered a faster rate of change.
More than 100 million people will escape poverty over the next 10 years. That's certainly a success by any measure. The question is, how quickly can resources be focused, channeled, how quickly can development projects be designed in just a handful of countries to really be able to push the needle?
As world leaders gather in Davos, the world poverty clock continues to tick in the right direction. But just how fast it keeps ticking down is now the key question. Catherine Drew, CGTN.
More and more products and services we use every day are now available on-demand apps, from fast food delivery to personal transport services. As a result, almost 200 service providers exist in the market today, many of them still struggling to turn a profit in such a hyper-competitive market. The players are now rushing to Africa, where the on-demand economy is less developed but rapidly growing. Uche Okoronko now takes a look into how some of these firms are faring.
Barely a month into this year, Spanish on-demand delivery service Glovo has announced it plans to exit 4 markets globally. Part of its goal, it says, to push for profitability by 2021. Industry experts insist that players in the on-demand services space have yet to figure out how to make their model more profitable. Glovo says it's now turning its focus to markets where it can establish itself amongst the top 2 delivery players, markets such as Kenya.
One of the things about Kenya that's really conducive for our entry is the sort of ease with technology of customers, of our partners, and even of the riders who are using the platform. In other countries we enter, there has to be a huge education about this, but actually Kenyans, I think, are very tech savvy.
Now, there's been a lot of debate about the profitability of on-demand services apps. What has been Glovo's experience?
When we entered the market, of course, there's a period of investment, investment in marketing, investment in establishing your operations. You don't have the economies of scale to be able to run the business profitably. We were tapping into operations hubs abroad that were more expensive than we knew that we could do them. So I think in the beginning, as is natural for any company entering a new market, we weren't really focused on profitability. That is definitely changing, and that was always the plan as we increase our time in the market to increase our profitability. So we are going to see that change. I don't think that means increasing prices for customers or damaging in any ways the relationships with our partners. There are some really, really clever ways and detailed orientated ways that we can improve our profitability.
Africa-focused Jumia is a cautionary tale in terms of the challenges of turning a profit. It was Africa's first tech firm to list on the New York market last year, with a value of over $1 billion. Its unicorn status came to an end when analysts cast some doubt on its sales figures. After a bruising 2019, in which it shut down its services in 3 countries, the company now says it will be relying on its already established online ecosystem to lead it back to the black.
We have done a lot of investments to build this logistics platform, to build this marketplace, and to build this payment platform. Now we are going to be extremely disciplined and very focused on our path to profitability, and that's where we are going. It's not a fintech company, it's not a marketplace, it's an e-commerce ecosystem where we have a very strong marketplace, a very strong logistics platform, and a very strong payment platform that complement each other to make Jumia what it is.
But what exactly does profitability in the on-demand delivery space look like? Uber is shifting towards a super app model where it plans to turn separate lines of business, such as rides and eats, into a single one-stop shop app, such as Glovo's. Uber's biggest rival, Estonia's Bolt, is building a ride-hailing, scooter and food delivery business across Europe and Africa. The billion-dollar startup, which just secured about $55 million from the European Investment Bank, says it plans to stay afloat by integrating more features into its offerings in markets such as Kenya.
We ensure that we continue to hammer on a number of things. We continue to provide a number of core services or a number of offerings around our services, which would include the safety, the convenience, the quality of any individual that decides to take a boat ride. And then, of course, on the other side, for the drivers, we ensure that we also provide for them the highest comparable earnings in the market.
Well, analysts also say that going forward, we could see delivery players changing their regional footprint via market exits and consolidation as they search for better finance platforms. The sector has also attracted huge amounts of investments in the past few years. But even though they expect growth well into the future, the hype around the sector and investment is certainly beginning to settle. Uche Okoronkwo, CGTN.
Let's take you back to Davos. As we reported earlier, Alphabet chief executive has warned regulators of a need to manage artificial intelligence and facial recognition to curb potential misuse. He was speaking at the World Economic Forum there in Davos, where he discussed the potential negative consequences and benefits to artificial intelligence. Now, Paul Berber is keeping a tab on events there in Davos. He joins us live now from there. So, Paul, what were the day's highlights today?
Yes, Peninah, this was the second major day of the World Economic Forum annual meetings here in Davos, the 50th year of these meetings. And for a second day, the proceedings were once again dominated by Mr. Donald Trump, the US president. He gave an unexpected and wide-ranging press conferences that could be characterized by boasts about his economic record and also jibes, thinly veiled and some less thinly veiled, including towards his opponents such as Greta Thunberg, the climate activist. He said that people should be focusing on positives now, and he railed against doom mongers. He also referred to the impeachment trial going on in the United States, calling it a hoax. But the other big news that came out of that press conference was that Donald Trump believes a trade deal can be done with the European Union, and he wants it to be done by November this year. This is, of course, when his election is. He said that it would be hard, though. He actually said that Brussels was harder to deal with than Beijing. He said that that's just the way it is. They've taken advantage of us for a long time, so we're going to have a deal. I suspect we're going to be able to make a deal, but he seemed to be saying that would be harder than it was than the phase one deal that the United States has been able to reach with China. Another big highlight of the day was actually an event co-hosted by CGTN about the Belt and Road. This was a Belt and Road Initiative Davos Forum, which was an opportunity, the organisers said, to allow partners and countries and business leaders to provide feedback to China about the Belt and Road Initiative. I had the chance to sit down with Mr. Zhu Min, who is the chair of this forum. He said that this was a wonderful opportunity. He also did refer to the coronavirus emergency that it seems to be emerging. He said that this was a clear example of a challenge that global leaders face that crosses borders, that knows no borders and requires multinational global response, and that the world needed to work together to combat this very serious, as he called it, very serious situation with the coronavirus.
Now, Paul, artificial intelligence was also one of the big talking points today. We heard from major regulators or major players calling for regulation. Why is it a big concern, and what proposals were put forward?
That's right, Peninah. We did actually hear from the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, and he said that artificial intelligence was essentially one of the most profound things that humanity was currently working on. He said it would end up being more consequential than electricity or fire, but he did indeed say that regulation is absolutely essential. He called for a global framework for the safe and responsible development of artificial intelligence. He likened it actually to climate change, the need for initiatives such as the Paris Climate Accord, global multilateral frameworks that need to be found in order to forge ahead with artificial intelligence technologies. He said there were many good uses for it, such as facial recognition technology for missing people, but of course there were certainly more sinister uses for artificial intelligence. And he said that it was a great start that European Union countries and the United States had started to pull together regulation for the development of artificial intelligence, but that much more was needed. This is, of course, not long after many Google employees revolted against the company for its potential AI contracts with the US military and the US government. So this was some effort to counter that. Interestingly, coming just a day after the founder of Huawei, Mr. Ren Zhengfei, spoke here at Davos, and he also talked a lot about artificial intelligence, saying it was potentially a great good for humanity, but that it had to be approached in a responsible way. That it was similar in some ways to nuclear power, certainly many advantages, but it had to be dealt with certainly properly. So AI, one of the top items on the agenda for Davos, but climate change certainly still the very dominant item. We're also, of course, covering trade.
Right, and still on the tech subject, Paul, France has put on hold its proposed tax on internet giants. Its finance minister was scheduled to meet with the US Treasury Secretary to possibly come up with a deal. Do we have any updates on that?
Yes, we do. Actually, just a couple of hours ago, the French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire did meet with the US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin on the sidelines here at Davos, and they did announce they had reached a deal to formulate a framework for digital services taxation. This a hugely controversial, contentious issue that's been going on for some time now, and the hope is that this arrangement to put on hold this really punishing tax on major digital companies, many of them American, to put that on pause until the end of 2020 at least, while a global framework on digital taxation is formulated. Now, it's not just France, of course, that has been thinking about introducing that. In fact, Sajid Javid, the UK Finance Minister, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, spoke here at Davos just before Steven Mnuchin and Bruno Le Maire met, saying that the UK would be, in fact, pressing ahead with a digital services tax of its own. So clearly a very, very big issue here at Davos, and we did hear from Steven Mnuchin just before that meeting with Bruno Le Maire, in which he said, I think we've been pretty clear that this proposed tax in France and in Europe is discriminatory. If you tax our tech firms, we will tax your tech companies. And there was the prospect of 100% taxes, tariffs on many French imports, including cheese and wine. So the news that there is at least a pause to this confrontation will certainly mean that champagne will be quite literally being uncorked in France and perhaps here in Davos as well. Back to you.
All right, Paul Baba in Davos. Thank you very much, Paul. You're watching Global Business. Coming up. $473 cases of coronavirus are confirmed in China. And Britain steps up its campaign to attract global tourists.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
For lucrative economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Peninah Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed, and this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
Reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
All right, let's have a look at other major stories of the day. Burkina Faso is reeling from another deadly attack by militants. The country's parliament has now approved the recruitment of local volunteers who will be given 2 weeks of military training, after which they will be given small arms and communication equipment. On Monday, heavily armed men stormed the villages of Alamu and Nagrogo, killing dozens of civilians and setting fire to a local market. The country's northern regions have seen a rise in militant attacks since 2015. Nigeria is stepping up efforts to achieve its sustainable development goals. The United Nations is urging the West African nation to use a collaborative system of governance to reach its SDG targets. These goals include ending poverty by the year 2030. The government also hopes to achieve gender equality as well as affordable and clean energy for all. And Chinese mainland authorities have confirmed 17 deaths and 548 cases from the new coronavirus pneumonia. The vast majority of these cases, 444 in total, are in the central province of Hubei, where the virus originated. So far, the virus has been confirmed in 24 out of 34 provincial-level regions across the country. Hubei is also the region of 7 overseas cases. Thailand has reported 4 cases, and the United States, Japan, and South Korea 1 each. And that's a look at some of the day's top stories. Let's focus now on the outbreak of coronavirus in China. As of Wednesday, nearly 473 cases have been confirmed, including 1 in both Taiwan and Macau. 9 people have also died in Hubei province, which the city of Wuhan is the provincial capital. In Beijing, the number of confirmed cases are now up to 10. Outside China, Thailand has reported 4 cases, while the United States, Japan, and South Korea have all confirmed 1 each. Each victim is said to have either come from or been in the central Chinese city of Wuhan recently. Earlier today, Chinese authorities confirmed that the new coronavirus was transmitted via wild animals illegally sold at a seafood market in Wuhan. The World Health Organization is holding an emergency meeting in Geneva to decide whether the outbreak is an international public health emergency. In the meantime, airlines and travel agencies across China have announced new measures of preventing the spread of the virus. Some travelers have been urged to change their plans and may get incentives if they do.
As the number of confirmed disease cases continue to rise, China's Civil Aviation Administration and the China Railway are offering refunds to passengers who purchased the fares to Wuhan. Many airlines and travel agencies, including Trip.com, Hainan Air, and Sichuan Airlines, have issued statements on their new measures for cancellations and rescheduling.
For medical workers who have to cancel their trips, if they can prove that they gave up their holidays to take care of infected patients and work in hospitals, we'll take the loss on any travel orders booked through us.
Travel agencies have also offered free cancellation guarantees on Wuhan-bound hotel reservations, attraction passes, and car bookings. For travelers diagnosed with new coronavirus pneumonia or quarantined by authorities, they may make refundable cancellations on all products and services booked through travel agencies. The same goes for those who may have come in contact with an infected person. As this sudden outbreak coincides with the Chinese Spring Festival, the largest human migration on Earth, with 3 billion passenger trips expected, travelers are being extra alert.
We should pay great attention to our personal hygiene, wear masks, and avoid going into crowded places.
I have to get back to Wuhan for Spring Festival. Our families have masks and we are prepared to protect ourselves.
I had planned to go out for the Spring Festival, but I've cancelled my trip.
Earlier on Monday, Chinese President Xi Jinping mandated the timely releases of incoming information on the disease and called for stronger international coordination of efforts. Meanwhile, China and other countries affected by this novel coronavirus will attend an emergency meeting convened by the WHO to ascertain whether the coronavirus warrants a public health emergency of international concern. Liu Yang, CGTN, Beijing.
The United Kingdom is the world's 10th biggest tourist destination, with over 36 million visiting in 2018. Visit Britain data shows that the United States remains the most valuable inbound market, with American visitors spending $2.8 billion. Nevertheless, the number of travelers originating from Europe is much larger than those traveling from North America. CGTN's Juliet Mann has more on that story.
Perhaps it's the scenery, the history, tradition. From the landmarks of London and beyond, the UK is a top tourist destination, whatever floats your boat.
I like the buildings, the structure, the architecture.
I do like to try the different kinds of food that you have here, but on the other hand, it's also a very interesting place because there's a lot of history here.
A record 39.7 million visitors from overseas are expected to come to Britain this year. And they've got cash to spend.
And tourism isn't just about people coming here and have a great time, though of course they do. It's also a hard-headed industry. This is about investment. Britain is great at attracting international investment. We attracted £7 billion of hotel investment last year. That's more than the rest of Europe.
Whether it's pub life or seeing a show, the UK's national agency wants to make tourism the most successful and productive sector in the UK. They say for every pound spent promoting Britain, £23 are spent by visitors. Now that's a good return on investment.
Tourism needs no trade deal. No, we're thriving. And you can see the great growth coming from the USA and China. We can look at the forward bookings for the next 6 months. So we know that US bookings are up around 11%, Chinese bookings up around 27%. So we have double-digit growths from the two great tourism markets in the world currently.
Include domestic tourism, and the industry is worth $165 billion, employing 3.1 million people all around the country. The British Tourism Authority says for every 22 inbound Chinese visitors, a new job is created in the UK tourism sector.
The story from China, from the US for British tourism is very good, but unfortunately, the vast number of visitors to Britain are from Europe, and they simply do not understand what is happening with Brexit. They know that Britain is leaving the European Union, but they have no idea what that means in terms of passports, in terms of bureaucracy for visiting the UK, and many of them are simply saying, let's not bother.
UK tourism seems like an economic powerhouse, a growth industry attracting international investment. But the big challenge for the sector in 2020 will be to woo Europeans, unsure of the cost and the practicalities around travel here after Brexit. Juliet Mann, CGTN, London.
Hong Kong's Lunar New Year flower fairs have opened. Our reporter Ho Wei visited the event to see if this year's New Year's preparations are any different.
Today is the opening day of the flower fair in Hong Kong, and this year there will be 15 flower fairs at multiple places in the city. And here I am at the Victoria Park, which is said to be the largest flower fair. And the fairs will be open till Saturday. It's the first day of Chinese traditional Lunar New Year. And usually in South China, it's a very long tradition for people to go to the flower fair ahead of the New Year to buy some fresh flowers as decoration and to also to express their wishes for a prosperous New Year.
100多，跟去年比是贵了还是便宜了？
Okay.
Thank you, Fortune, for a good New Year.
Oh yeah.
Yo, thank you very much.
This is orchid, one of the favorite flowers at the fair. The price is $80, 80 Hong Kong dollars, or about $10 US for a bunch. This is the chrysanthemum, and these are the kumquat. These are also very popular at the flower fair because their Chinese name in Mandarin and also the Cantonese rhyme with the Chinese word of good luck.
今天人不多，有那个游船啊，游船一點點啦，少一點點。
In the commodities market, gold was little changed today as strong technical support and expected dovish monetary policy from global central banks offset revived appetite for riskier assets and an upbeat dollar. Investors will keep a close eye on the ECB's first policy meeting of the year on Thursday, while the Fed's first meeting is scheduled for January 28th to 29th. Lower interest rates reduce the opportunity cost of holding non-yielding bullion and weigh on the dollar. Still ahead on Global Business. The story of an Ivorian designer promoting culture by dressing celebrities.
Don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Let's cross over to Cote d'Ivoire now, where a young Ivorian designer's mission is to use her talent to revolutionize African fashion by showcasing Ivorian traditions through the styling and dressing of celebrities. CGTN's Brian Toussaint with the details.
Rebecca Zoro is the creator of the Yebi design clothing brand. She is today one of the few Cote d'Ivoire fashion designers who are rapidly gaining popularity due to their unique work. Currently, Rebecca is working on Lu, her new collection. In this collection, Rebecca seeks to promote the Goru culture, an ethnic group from the southwest part of Cote d'Ivoire.
Lu means girl in the Goro language. The designs are inspired by the Goro masks and the woven loincloths. My end goal is to make known the Ivorian culture through fashion.
Unlike her other clothing lines, Rebecca's Yebi design stands out for its originality. In only 5 years of existence, her brand has already dressed several celebrities around the world, including American star Beyoncé.
When I sent the skirt to Beyoncé, I had no idea she would actually wear it. I was shocked and happy when I saw pictures of Beyoncé wearing my skirt on the internet. After dressing her, I started gaining popularity and got the privilege to dress other celebrities in France, the United States, and many journalists in Africa and around the world.
From the design to the marketing of her clothes, Rebecca is involved in everything that concerns her brand, a quality trait that many of her collaborators recognize in her.
I am Rebecca's photographer, and I am amazed every time I see her creations. Usually, she's the one who I turn to when I want to give gifts to my clients. She really does quality work.
As time goes by, the Yebi design brand is becoming more and more popular on the continent and around the globe. And this year, Rebecca's only dream is to create a men's clothing line. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Southern Africa has been facing a severe drought that has left an estimated 45 million people in dire need of food aid. An entrepreneur in Zimbabwe has created a means to plug the shortage of food production in the country. This innovation aims to reduce the deficit by cutting the production time by half through the use of the hydroponic system.
Zimbabwe, riddled by drought and an economic crisis, has millions in need of food aid. But a mother of two has created a means to supplement the shortage by use of hydroponics to grow vegetables. Hydroponics is an element of hydroculture, which enables growing of plants without soil by using mineral nutrient solutions in a water solvent.
Hydroponics farming saves water
and I really enjoy it because I don't have to worry about the water. I don't have water here, so I have to buy water, but because it's hydroponics, I'm saving water by 90%. The other reason why I opted for hydroponics farming is the growth rate of hydroponics. It's faster, and then I can harvest even much faster than the soil-based farming.
An accountant by day and farmer at night, Mukarati realized her pastime could be a profitable venture. She now makes around $1,100 a month in a country where some government workers only earn $76 a month. In hydroponic farming, water is conserved because it is reused multiple times. Hydroponically grown plants also require no pesticides because there are no soil-borne diseases.
When we are farming in soil, we will need more water, and then the production rate will be less than what is happening in hydroponics farming. When you are doing hydroponics farming, your crop grows faster by 1/3, which means about 33%, and you tend to harvest it in a shorter period than when you are doing conventional farming, when you are farming in the soil.
A large part of southern Africa is dealing with severe drought. Temperatures are rising at double the global average, affecting production. It takes 10 weeks to harvest vegetables on soil. The duration is cut down by 4 weeks using hydroponics, allowing Mukarati to grow as much as 140 plants per cycle to supply Harare's top restaurants.
Her lettuce is of such a high quality, which I use a lot of it, so I've had her supplying me for over a year now, twice a week, in bulk amounts. She packages it beautifully. It's always amazingly fresh, has no blemishes on it whatsoever.
We have a problem with water. In fact, the whole world has a problem with water. Hydroponics is very water sensitive. The amount of water used is a fraction from normal agricultural purposes. What we prefer also in the market is that the product comes with its roots on. Therefore, it has a much longer shelf life.
Last year, she designed a hydroponic starter pack, which she sells for $200. For the budding entrepreneur, she hopes to quadruple production from June by constructing bigger greenhouses. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Can you plant it as well?
Looking at the currencies, South Africa's rand firmed more than 1% today, helped by a recovery in demand for riskier assets. Swift updates from China about the spread of a new flu-like coronavirus raised hopes the outbreak would be contained. The outbreak tested risk appetite on Tuesday, although most analysts point to recent losses as being temporary, even as investors grapple with its potential implications for the global economy. And with that, we wrap up Global Business tonight. We'd love to hear from you. Send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. I'm Peninah Karibe. Thank you for watching.